struggling with binge eating but trapped in a never-ending cycle? You binge eat and then make every promise to yourself that it won't happen again, and then it does. It's an emotional roller coaster and it feels like you can't get off, but you can. By the end of this video, you'll understand the binge eating cycle and why you continue to binge eat despite your best efforts. Understanding the binge eating cycle is the first step in stopping your binge eating. Start your journey towards a better relationship with food and your body. Managing an eating disorder can be a lonely journey. For in-depth information and strategies for managing your eating disorder, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell in the corner so you're notified when I post a new video every Wednesday. I'm Meredith MacKenzie of Parallel Wellness. I'm a registered clinical counselor and eating disorders therapist. In my therapeutic work with hundreds of clients with eating disorders, I've supported them to loosen the grips of their eating disorder, including binge eating, to live fulfilling lives with freedom from food and compensatory behaviors. Now it's your turn. Before I get started, I want to add a disclaimer to this video. This video is not a source of assessment or any kind of psychological evaluation of your symptoms. The purpose of this video is for education and entertainment purposes only. The first thing you need to know about the binge eating cycle is that it's both an innate or biological reaction and an emotional one. And this is what makes it so complicated both to understand and to stop. And because of this nuanced relationship between our innate or biological drives and our emotions, the binge eating cycle can look different for everyone, but there are some similarities. Now, for some people, this binge cycle might occur within one day, or the cycle could go on for a number of days, leading to a binge at the end. Now, as I mentioned, binge eating is the result of both biological or innate processes and emotional processes. So I'm going to first start by talking about the innate or biological processes that are at play. First, it's important to know how your body naturally responds to hunger. When our body's finished digesting and using up all the energy from the previous meal, we experience a drop in our blood sugar and insulin levels. With this drop in blood sugar and insulin, our guts start to produce a substance called ghrelin. Ghrelin travels from our gut up to our brain to let it know that we're needing sustenance. And from here, our brains command the release of a second hormone called neuropeptide Y, which stimulates our appetite and gives us that sensation of feeling hungry. This is the same hormonal process that occurs for every human being in order for them to feel hungry. For many people, and this may be true for you as well, the binge eating cycle starts with a period of restriction, and this restriction can look different for everyone. For some, that restriction means that you're actually restricting the size or portions of your meals. So you may be eating less adequate portion sizes for your snacks and your meals earlier in the day or over a number of days. This happens a lot when we try to restrict our calories in dieting. Our bodies are used to receiving a certain portion of food, and when we don't deliver that food, it gets hungry. Another form of restriction that some people engage in that's related to the binge cycle is restricting the quality of food that we're eating. When we cut out certain food groups or food types or even specific foods that we really do enjoy, it creates a sense of emotional restriction. And this is where cheat meals or cheat days have become so popular because we recognize that when we restrict our favorite foods, it only makes us want them more. So when we consider the restriction portion of the binge eating cycle, when we're restricting the amount of food we're eating or the time between our meals, our blood sugar and insulin levels drop even further, which increases our body's production of ghrelin and neuropeptide Y, which intensifies that sensation of hunger and drive for food. Now we'll bring in the emotional side of the binge eating cycle. Deep within our brains is the Mesolimbic Center. This is the area of our brains that processes the sensation of pleasure. And this area of our brain is stimulated when we eat delicious food, particularly foods that are fatty and sugary. You know, the ones that make you feel good when you eat them. I want to stop anyone who's watching this who wants to vilify fatty foods or sugary foods. The reason our brain responds so favorably to fatty and sugary foods because these foods have a lot of nutritional value. In our evolution as human beings, we've needed these foods for the energy that they provide to us. So through our evolution, our brains have been designed to seek out these foods and let us know that we want to eat more of them. When we eat these foods, chemicals are released that bind to the receptors within our brain, which then triggers the release of dopamine. And dopamine is a feel-good hormone. It's the same hormone that's released when we fall in love. And when it feels good, your brain wants more of it naturally. So what happens within the restricting phase of the binge eating cycle is that we restrict our food portions either throughout the day or over a longer period of time, which increases our hunger sensation. As well, when we limit the fatty foods and carbohydrates that we eat, our brains don't have the opportunity to produce and release dopamine. So throughout the restriction phase of the binge eating cycle, we become hungrier and our emotional state declines. All of this is a setup for binge eating. This is one of the main reasons that when my clients come to me and they talk about intermittent fasting, which is a huge trend and fad right now, I ask them to consider how this might impact both their biological drive for food as well as their emotional drives, as there is the potential that it could set someone up for binge eating. If you've struggled with binge eating and now are recognizing some of the patterns of the restrictive phase of the binge eating cycle, what did your restrictive phase look like? Comment in the comment section down below, because I'm sure you're not the only one who's experienced it, and it would be really helpful for the other people who watch this video to know that they're not alone. Typically within the restrictive phase of the binge eating cycle, emotionally we can feel pretty good or at least okay. For some people, this phase within the binge eating cycle feels really powerful. There are a lot of promises that people make within this phase to themselves, that they're going to keep restricting or that they've got this diet and they're the ones that are in control. And so for a lot of people, I don't think that they recognize this is actually the start of the danger zone of the binge eating cycle. Towards the end of the restrictive phase, planning the binge begins. And again, this will look different for all different people, but when your blood sugar is down, your insulin levels are down, and your ghrelin and neuropeptide Y are high, in addition to possibly having low dopamine, we start to think with our emotion mind, and our brains become incredibly focused on food and what will feel good. And there's several key triggers to binge eating. The first, and what research has found to be the most prominent, is experiencing stress and anxiety throughout your day. Many people who binge eat do so as a way to distance themselves from what they're experiencing emotionally or to numb what they're feeling. A binge can feel like a vacation from all of the stress that's mounted throughout the day. Now, alongside that psychological numbing that we get from binge eating, there's also that chemical factor that sometimes triggers people into binge eating. As I mentioned before, eating causes the release of dopamine, which feels good. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that eating is an addiction, but when something feels good and we're struggling, we're feeling stressed, we're feeling overwhelmed, we want something that's going to feel good. And food will do that. Now, related to both the psychological and the chemical response that we receive from binge eating, it may often be a response to extreme dieting. When we've avoided specific food groups for a long period of time, or we've reduced the portions of our eating to less than what our body really wants and needs, our drive to eat is going to be high, which in some cases results in binge eating. And finally, for anyone who has experienced binge eating over time, it can become habitual. Anything that we do over and over and over again, especially when it's paired with reward of reducing our stress and releasing dopamine, can become a habit. And so in some cases, and you might recognize this for yourself, binge eating can be a result of all four of these triggers combined together. Following the restriction phase of the binge eating cycle is the anticipation stage. In this phase of the binge eating cycle, the planning for the binge begins. Hunger and emotions are high enough that we start to focus on how am I going to access the food that I'm going to eat. As many people watching this video might recognize, the foods that are chosen during a binge can often be the foods that are higher in fat or higher in carbohydrates. And that's really because that's what the body's craving. And it's going to result in the biggest reward on an emotional level. So as the anticipation phase turns into the binge phase, people often report feeling elated, excited, satisfied, relieved that they're finally eating the foods that they've been craving. And you'll remember, if you watched my last video on the warning signs for binge eating disorder, that the binge phase can have a lot of layers and multiple conflicting emotions can occur. Some people experience this dissociation from their bodies, and they're eating as though they're driven to do it without fully feeling present to completely enjoy the food that they're eating. This detachment or dissociation from the body also allows a person to not fully feel as their bodies are becoming full with food, so they may push past some of those sensations of satiation that they start to get within their body. On a biological level, when you start to eat, your body goes to work again. It starts to digest the food that you're eating. And nerves within our stomach sense the stretching as we're filling our stomachs. These nerves send a message to our brain to let the brain know that we're full. But again, if we're detached from our bodies while we're binge eating, it's easier to ignore the satiation sensation. Now, towards the end of the binge phase, and as we approach the aftermath of the binge phase, which I'll call the aftermath phase, we start to become more in tune with that sensation of fullness, and it can actually feel quite painful to have your body so full with food. This sensation is often paired with feelings of guilt and shame and disappointment and really heavy, difficult feelings, which are the result of how we've internalized the standards and expectations of our society for dieting and maintaining a thin ideal. However, it doesn't change the fact that we feel them in the moment. Within this aftermath phase, it's not uncommon for people to start to plan what they're going to do to prevent the next binge. You want to make it better. You don't want to see this cycle continue. You want freedom from it. However, the anxiety and the stress that you feel as the result of binge eating can actually start the cycle all over again, which only perpetuates the likelihood that binge eating will continue. In today's video, we've covered the biological or innate and the emotional contributors to the binge eating cycle and why it's so difficult to overcome binge eating. Know that understanding the binge eating cycle and your own unique cycle is the first step in stopping your own binge eating cycle. I hope that you can use this information to have more compassion for yourself and to understand that binge eating is incredibly difficult to stop with willpower alone. You have in no way failed if you're struggling with binge eating, and it is not a reflection of your worth as a person or what you're capable of. If you're looking to start your journey in binge eating recovery and want to know what's next, how do you actually stop the binge eating cycle, stay tuned for next week's video, which I'll publish on Wednesday, where I'm going to talk about how you can stop the binge eating cycle. I've also created a mindful eating log, which I frequently use within my private practice with clients with binge eating disorder, and I've added a link to it in the description box down below. So click the link and you'll be able to download a copy of this for you to use at home. You're going to want to check out the rest of my videos on eating disorders and binge eating, including my last video on the warning signs of binge eating disorder. I provided links in the description box down below where you can watch these videos. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, be sure to subscribe, and share it with your friends or anyone that you think would benefit from learning more about eating disorders or binge eating. I look forward to seeing you in the next video on Wednesday.